The next topic is using accounts payable. Accounts payable transactions can be entered in a number of different ways. We will discuss purchase orders, the purchase receive inventory window, and how to enter various forms of payments. Each transaction updates their respective journals, which in turn updates the general ledger. However, the purchase order journal does not update the general ledger. To enter a purchase order, click the Purchase Orders button from the Vendors and Purchases Navigation Center. If you're using an earlier version of Peachtree, you can also select Purchase Orders from the Tasks menu. The Purchase Orders window is used to enter and print purchase orders for inventory and supplies ordered from vendors. Some important fields on this window include the good through date, which defaults to 1 month past the purchase order date, but you can enter a different date. If you plan to print the purchase order, leave the PO number field blank. You will enter it during the print routine. If this purchase order was manually written, enter the purchase order number here. Click the Close Purchase Order checkbox to close a purchase order. A purchase order is automatically closed after all items are received. Select the Drop Ship checkbox to specify a drop shipment from a vendor directly to a customer. By default, the unit price is the last purchase cost for the item. New items that have not been ordered before and do not have beginning balances use the cost associated to them in the last unit cost field on the Maintain Inventory Items window. If necessary, this price can be changed to a different amount. Enter a job if the transaction line needs to be applied to a job. The amount will not be applied to the job until the items are received. Next, we'll talk about purchasing and receiving inventory and entering bills. Select Receive Inventory from the Inventory and Services Navigation Center. This screen is used to enter bills from vendors and to receive inventory that arrives from suppliers. Select the Drop Ship checkbox to specify a drop shipment from a vendor directly to a customer. Select the Waiting on Bill checkbox if a shipment of inventory is received without a vendor invoice. This allows the receipt to be recorded and inventory to be updated. The invoice is not available for payment until the transaction is edited by deselecting this checkbox and saving it again. The Terms fields shows the vendor terms as set up in the vendor record. To change the terms, click the arrow button to open the Terms Information window. Make any changes and click OK. If you select a vendor with no open purchase orders, the Apply to Purchases tab appears by default. This tab is used to enter purchases that did not originate on a purchase order. In addition, if items were received but not included in the original purchase order, you can add them here. The Unit Price field shows the last purchase cost for the item selected. New items that have not been ordered before and do not have beginning balances use the cost assigned to them in the last unit cost field on the Maintain Inventory Items window. If necessary, this price can be changed to a different amount. Enter a job if the transaction line needs to be applied to a job. Enter the payment amount into the Amount Paid at Purchase field to make a partial or full payment to an invoice. Two additional fields appear when the amount is entered into the Amount Paid field. When you select a vendor who has one or more open purchase orders, the Apply to Purchase Order Number tab appears. Select a purchase order from the Apply to Purchase Order Number drop-down list. All open purchase orders for the selected vendor are listed. The Remaining field displays the number of items that remain outstanding on a purchase order. This field cannot be changed from this window. Enter the quantity of each item received into the Received field. The purchase order will remain open until all items are received or until it is manually closed. Enter a job if the transaction line needs to be applied to a job. Now we'll discuss 3 ways you can pay bills in Peachtree. To record payments, select Pay Bills from the Vendors and Purchases Navigation Center. Invoices and bills for individual vendors can be selected and paid using this option. The Payments window can be used to enter cash purchases and disbursements that do not have associated vendor invoices or bills. It is also used to apply payments to vendor invoices entered as purchases. When a vendor ID is entered, all unpaid bills for the vendor appear. You can choose to pay an entire invoice or make partial payments. The Apply to Invoices tab lists all outstanding invoices for the selected vendor. Select invoices to pay by selecting the Pay checkbox next to each one. When all invoices are selected, click Print to print the disbursement check immediately, or click Save to print the check later. When you select a vendor without any outstanding invoices or bills, the Apply to Expenses tab appears. The Apply to Expenses tab is used to enter prepayments and cash purchases. If you select a customer ID on the Payments window, the Apply to Customer Account tab appears. This tab can be used to record customer refunds. Select Write Checks from the Vendors and Purchases Navigation Center. From the Write Checks window, you can quickly enter a check and apply the amount to an expense or a series of expenses. If the payment does not involve invoices or inventory items, this is the easiest payment method to use. A manual check is a check that was handwritten or previously printed and not entered into Peachtree. A manual check is recorded like a normal payment with one difference. The check number is entered into the check number field. If a number is not entered into this field, Peachtree will print a check for this transaction during the next check printing cycle. If cash was used to pay for an item, enter a reference number or a word into the check number field that identifies the transaction. This prevents Peachtree from printing a check. A reference number can be used only once. When you pay a vendor a prepayment or deposit amount, this amount can be applied to future invoices. To create a prepayment, select Pay Bills from the Vendors and Purchases Navigation Center. Select a vendor from the Vendor ID lookup list in the Payment window, and select the Apply to Expenses tab. Then select the Prepayment checkbox. Accounts payable reports provide information about your vendors and their associated transactions. To preview or print these reports, select View All Vendor and Purchases Reports from the Vendors and Purchases Navigation Center, or select Reports from the menu bar. The check register lists all checks posted for the selected date range. This report is useful for keeping track of checks. The Purchase Journal lists purchases made with related general ledger distributions for a selected date range. This report is useful for verifying general ledger postings and tracking purchase transactions. The Vendor Ledger lists detailed vendor transactions and the outstanding balance for each vendor for a selected date range, which helps to resolve questions regarding individual vendor activity.